So thank you, Tom. Yeah, like you said, my name is Bill Walsh. I'm the Director of Marketing and Communications for Center of the American Experiment. I got to find my clicker. Oh, here's my clicker. So tonight's presentation, they asked me, reasons for hope, election 2024. It's a difficult topic, I think, and I'll do some caveats here in a minute. But let me just by way of introduction, just kind of talk about American Experiment first. So we are Minnesota's think tank. If you don't know who we are a public policy group located here in Minnesota. We're a state-based think tank. We write, research, advocate. We're at the Capitol. We do some lobbying. We do a lot of campaigns about state policy. So education, energy, healthcare, public safety. We have 2 economists on our staff. We write a lot about the state budget. That's kind of what we do. We're Minnesota's think tank focused on public policy here in Minnesota. We have these really smart people called policy fellows in those different areas that I just mentioned, and our 2 economists. Like I said, they come in and they write and research and publish, and I'm the marketing director, so I just sell what they produce. But you can see this is our little group. We're about 22 employees. We're not a huge nonprofit. We rely on we're a 501c3 nonprofit. We rely on donations from Minnesotans like you, about 10,000 donors every year that donate to us to support our work. So here in Minnesota. You can find us at AmericanExperiment.org. I'll do my little commercial. Like I said, these policy fellows are really prolific. We are a content machine. So our website changes daily, several times a day. We have a newsletter you can get. There's a little card on your tables if you want to fill that out and leave it with me to get on our newsletter email list. We send an email on Friday. We see someone on Tuesday. Try not to spam you too much, but it's just kind of the best of the content for the week. So you can get hooked up with that. We also publish a free quarterly magazine called Thinking Minnesota. So I want to emphasize the word free. I've put some on your tables as well. There is a card in there, a couple of them, I think, in the magazine to fill out. And you can just sign up, and we'll start mailing that to you. The next issue goes out in about a week. So once a quarter, the best of our content, although we save some things just for the magazine, some real long feature pieces in there. We also do a quarterly poll to go with the magazine. So every quarter we go out and poll about 500 Minnesotans. You're going to see a little bit of polling in this presentation today, but we do that. We've consistently done that for about 5 years. So we've got a lot of data on what Minnesotans think and believe about the state and about policy. So that is Minnesota Center of the American Experiment. He already did my bio, but yeah, you can see it. So I've worked in government and political communications for a long time. I think my first political campaign was 1992. I worked in the House about 1995, and then, like you said, Governor Plenty for a while. Done it all, and now I'm at the think tank. This is great. I have a 9-to-5 job now. I've never had one of those before. So the office starts about 9, and they go home at 5, and nobody calls me at 7 o'clock at night or 7 o'clock in the morning to tell me that, I've worked for political people my whole career, so you won't believe the calls you get, about crises that are happening or what people think are crises, but maybe really aren't crises. But it's really nice right now having a 9-to-5 job. All right, so let's get into the presentation. So, reasons for hope, election 2024. So this is a difficult topic because somebody asked me, just in talking before we started here, is there a reason for hope that is not based on the election? And that's difficult to answer today at 39 days from the election. We're 39 days out. So this presentation is going to be an analysis of the political environment in Minnesota as it relates to hope that there be change. I'm going to set it up a little bit in terms of the environment, where we're at, what's been happening at the Capitol especially. As a Catholic, as a conservative, we're going the wrong direction in the state of Minnesota. So when they asked me to do reasons for hope, election 2024, my assumption is that we're going to talk about change. We're going to talk about change, and the only change that's happening is the State House this fall. So just kind of give that caveat. You heard my bio. I'm a Republican. I come from persuasion. This discussion is going to be it's going to be slanted that direction because that's the landscape of the politics right now. But again, we're a 501c3. We don't tell you who to vote for. I'm not going to tell anybody who to vote for today. This is more of an analysis. So that's kind of my disclaimer, my caveat as we get started. But so the lay of the land in politics in Minnesota today is we hear this word trifecta a lot. There's a trifecta in St. Paul governing the Capitol. The House is run by one party, the Democrat Party. They have a 70-64 majority. That's the Speaker of the House. The Senate is tighter, 34-33. And then, of course, we have Governor Walsh as the governor. So all three in the same party, they call that a trifecta. It just essentially means they're able to pass their agenda without really worrying about the opposition party because they've got the votes, they've got the numbers. Now, in answering that question about hope, one of the things that's a little bit hopeful that doesn't have to do with what the outcome of an election is in that 34-33 number especially. The margin of victory is very close. The state is very divided. It's really 50-50, the population of the state, in terms of how they believe the state government should be run. So the 2022 election came down to 3 Senate races that were very close. One that was about 150 votes, one way or the other, swung it in the Cottage Grove, Hastings area to give us this 34-33 majority, which allowed this whole agenda I'm going to talk briefly about to pass. So I think there's some hope in the fact that it's not an overwhelming, if you believe a certain way, not everybody in the state is against you. A lot of people are with you. It is very tight, very close, as is the country, but certainly in Minnesota, a very tight margin. But the result right now is a trifecta, and they've had that power for 2 years now, the 2023 session and the 2024 legislative session. So we call the 2023 session off the cliff. And this happens a lot in politics. One party gets power, complete power, and they kind of have a pent-up agenda of items they want to pass. And in 2023, the Minnesota legislature and Governor Walsh certainly did that. It was a monumental session, an overwhelming session, a lot of really impactful, I can't come up with any more words to say that, a lot of really important legislation passed in 2023. American Experiment, we did a tour around the state called Off the Cliff, and we kind of told folks what happened and kind of chronicled all of it. I won't do that whole presentation over, but a couple of big things. There was this surplus you heard about, the $17.6 billion budget surplus, a lot of it because of some COVID funding and from the federal government, but that money is now gone. They spent every dime of that, the legislature did, the governor signed it. In addition, they raised another $10 billion in taxes, and so that's one part of the lay of the land. They also passed a sweeping, I'll call it radical agenda, in social issues, in education reform, tax policy, business policy, anti-business policy, the paid family leave bill alone. We could do a whole seminar on that. If there's business owners here that are starting to grapple with that coming down the pike, it's going to be very difficult for small business especially to deal with that legislation coming down the pike. So that's kind of the off-the-cliff 2023 session. Now, as I mentioned, the public is not supportive of that agenda. So we went out and polled in 2023, May of 2023, as this agenda was happening. We were in the field the last week of the session, and I would argue they got some of the best coverage. If you look at the media coverage of what they were doing in St. Paul, they were on TV every night. Star Tribune's writing about all their things they're doing in a very favorable way. This great agenda is passing, and we thought, let's check in with Minnesotans and see how they feel. And we asked, thinking about the legislature, has the work done so far during such a bad, excellent, good, only fair or poor? So 59% told us that week that it's only fair or poor. So as they're watching the Capitol and seeing what's happening, they're telling our pollster, not so much on that agenda, only fair or poor. I think there's hope in that number in terms of where the public is and how close this is in Minnesota. I'm not going to go into the whole agenda, but there's one of my colleagues, Bill Glahn, published this post a few weeks ago. 6 kind of, he called them infamous posts or laws passed in Minnesota. This is kind of, from a Catholic perspective, a lot of damaging things were passed in 2023. I'll start with one of the most important and controversial issues in politics, of course, abortion. We have put in place an abortion regime in Minnesota that is, I would argue, one of the most lenient, open, liberal, whatever word you want to use, in the world. Not even in the country, in the world. They eliminated all language restricting abortion in the statutes in 2023. Over the years, I've been working in the legislature for a long time. Like in the Plenty administration, for instance, he was able to pass women's right to know law in 2003. There were parental consent laws in Minnesota. If a minor wanted to get an abortion, they had to get consent of one of the parents. There were waiting periods. There was informed consent, things like that. All of that is gone. All of that has been eliminated from the statute in the statutes. And even there's been this argument about Governor Walsh running for president about this born alive, care for someone that's born alive, a botched abortion, things like that. You got to read the fine print. There was language that covered that in the law in a positive way. That language has been removed. So you can argue what the intent is or whether that's infanticide or not, but there was language there and now it's removed. Similar language that was there and removed as it relates to the human rights statute. For some reason, they woke up one day in the legislature, and the human rights statute, this is really small, I can't read it, but forever, as it related to human rights violations based on gender, sex, all these different things, there was this line in statute forever that said, I got to see it, sexual orientation. It had to do with sexual orientation. Sexual orientation does not mean a physical or sexual attachment to children by an adult. That's been in our human rights code forever. So yes, sexual orientation, can't discriminate based on that, but not pedophilia, okay? So that language has been removed from the statutes as well in that 2023 session. So this is all part of that kind of off the cliff. You've heard a lot about Minnesota becoming a trans refuge state. So they enacted this law that I believe is not constitutional from a federal state by state. They're trying to impose a state law in Minnesota on folks that might come here to get care for a transgender use. They say, I forgot the phrase already. Gender affirming care, thank you. Which could be a sex change operation or use of medicine. They're trying to protect kids that would come here to get that kind of care, even if a parent in another state didn't want that to happen. I don't believe it's going to be constitutional if it ever happens. I don't think anybody's tried to push this yet, but they made this thing. And by the way, when the Governor Walsh gets up and talks about this, he talks about these things as kind of his new tourism in the state. These are things he believes are going to attract people to Minnesota. We have a problem in Minnesota where we are losing income. We are losing people at the top income levels. Actually, matter of fact, all income levels, we're losing people except for the bottom two where we're gaining. We have a problem in Minnesota. Minnesotans leaving because of a whole bunch of reasons, weather being one of them, but also tax policy. And his answer is we're going to gain people based on our liberal abortion laws and our trans refuge state. You can go to the state website on tourism and it's there. So. So those are I won't go through all of them, but this is a post that my colleague did, like I said. The last one I should talk about in education. You're going to hear a lot soon about ethnic studies, if you haven't already. So we've put in place in the state of Minnesota, I would call a radical ethnic studies agenda into our schools, and it's coming to schools near you. They're trying to figure it out. They're working on the framework right now at the Department of Education. It's going to be public, I believe, after the election. Actually, they're going to kind of hold it until the election's over. But this is when you hear ethnic studies, we did polling on this as well. You think, okay, ethnic studies sounds great. The study of cultures. We want to study other cultures. Who's against that? Of course we do. But that's not what ethnic studies is in their definition. It gets deeply into separating kids by race, and then talking about power struggles between the races. Down to the kindergarten level is what we're going to be teaching. There's winners and losers, there's aggressors and victims, and you're part of one or the other class, and we're going to divide kids into those things. And there's a lot of politics written into the law in this. So this ethnic studies agenda is as radical as anything. California has done this ahead of us, and we are number 2 in the country. We're following California's lead on a radical ethnic studies agenda that is coming down the pike. So I say all that just sort of as a setup for change. When you ask me, is there hope for change? That's what we want to change from. So of course I say hope. I just brought you all down right now. You're all like, gosh, why do we live here, right? And then we want to answer that question. So again, back to the politics of this. I'm going to just run through an analysis of the election in Minnesota in the next 39 days. And we'll spend some time on the State House because the House is the only body up for election. The Senate has a 4-year term, and they're in the middle of that 4-year term. The House in Minnesota is up every 2 years. So the House members, all 134 of them, are on the ballot. Again, if you imagine changing one of the trifecta to another party so that there's more compromise and more compromise necessary, and they can't just run through a whole agenda, this is kind of where I'm heading with this analysis. We'll talk a little bit about school boards too. There's a lot of hope in school boards in Minnesota. There's way less political too, way less partisan. And then I have one little slide on the presidential election, which I do not want to get into because I don't. There's not a lot of hope there. I don't think either way. We're a state group, so I'm not going to talk about that. So let me just get into the House. Hope is in the House. Like I said, all 134 seats are on the ballot this year. You saw the number of 70 to 64. It takes 68 votes to run the House. That's the majority to pass a bill, to elect a speaker. So the Republicans would need 4 seats to gain in order to flip that body into another control. And that would end the trifecta. And I call it stop the bad behavior. You wouldn't be able to start undoing all these laws I just talked about. That's going to take a long time to do. You're going to need a new majority of people with public support to do that. But at least nothing more is going to get passed or rammed through without a lot more compromise and a lot more thought, and that you're going to get better legislation. So the state of Minnesota is really divided. This is a map you can't really see, but this is like every state, every district, and the color coded for it. There's 134 seats. There are maybe 12 or 15 that I would call swing ability to go one way or the other. Most of them are either all Republican or all Democrat. There's not really a question as to what's going to happen in the election. So the whole thing, this is true in the country too. You're seeing this in swing states like Pennsylvania, Arizona, Georgia. You're seeing this in Congress. There's 435 seats in the House and Congress, and there's only a handful every year that are really up for grabs. So this is very true in Minnesota. There's about 12 to 15 swing districts in the state of Minnesota. So I picked a few to just talk about, just kind of give you an idea of what could happen on election night. We can come back and see later which of these happen and what you see. We really never know. But we'll start from the north and kind of work our way down. These are in numeric order. Although this one I start with happens to be the best chance to flip in the state. Tom, you recognize this? This is your district right there. That's Virginia, I think, right there, the dot. So this is an open seat on the Iron Range. The Iron Range has been changing. When you grew up there, Tom, it was all Democrat. Everybody was a Democrat. And now it's really swung the other way. President Trump wins the Iron Range. Pete Stauber's the congressman from up there, very comfortable Republican, not under any threat to lose his election. And many of the House and Senate seats have gone Republican over the years. This is kind of an island now. This was a state rep that had the seat. He was very popular. He's retired, so it's an open seat. Like I said, Donald Trump won this district in the last election. Even Scott Jensen, the Republican candidate for governor, won this district. There's not many of those that he did win. And the Republican candidate they recruited is a minor. He works at Mintac and is a minor, and which is the right kind of thing to be. If you want to get a good candidate for the district, he fits the district. So this is probably the best chance, the top one to flip. And so you're going to kind of keep your eye on, I think I feature 7 districts. They need to flip 4 of these 7. 18A down in Mankato. This is North Mankato. It's again, most of greater Minnesota, you saw that big map is all red. Those are all Republican districts. This is kind of a rare rural Minnesota blue district. It's northern, there's some precincts in Mankato, but mostly it's North Mankato, which is its own city, and then St. Peter and some precincts in the country. Very close margin in the last election, 411 votes. And again, those Mankato precincts could prevent from flipping because they're more Democrat than Republican. And this could be a Walsh factor here too with Tim Walz. I'm going to talk about Tim Walz on the top of the ticket in a minute, but certainly he's very strong in Mankato. He's a teacher in Mankato before he became governor. He's a congressman down there, so that could influence that district. 26A, I would say this is the second most likely district to flip. This is Gene Pawlowski has been in the State House for 38 years. When I worked in the House years ago, 30 years ago, we used to try to find people to run against Gene Pawlowski because the district looked Republican. We got to win that seat. But Pawlowski won every time. He's very well liked in that district. Served for 38 years. He's retiring. So the district is open. Winona is an interesting town. They like sort of what I call sensible GOP candidates. We've had senators there for years. Bob Kierlin was the senator there. He owns Fastenal, the company that nuts and bolts and fasteners. Business guy. They elected him. The senator there now is Senator Miller. His family owns Miller Scrap in town, and they're really kind of pillars of the community in Winona. They've recruited a city councilman in Winona to run, so I think it's a very good candidate for that seat, and a very likely chance that this one flips. There you go, he's on city council. 32B, Blaine and Lexington, so a suburban seat, a close margin in 2022, won by 413 seats. Blaine is a growing town, a lot of growth in Blaine, and it's growing more Republican every day. So I think those 2 trends are good for a flip here. Coon Rapids, this seat is open because Jerry Newton is not on the ballot. So again, a very interesting figure. Jerry Newton has been on a ballot one way or another in the city of Coon Rapids every election since 1994. He served on the school board, he went to the House, he went to the Senate, and then back to the House. So he's retiring. as a House member. So I've run elections against Mr. Newton, Senator Newton, and have failed to beat him. And it's because he's so popular in Coon Rapids. And so if you look at the data, the normal Republican does really well in Coon Rapids, but Newton does better. So with Newton not on the ballot, again, he barely won this district because there's a lot of Andover as well. So it's Andover and Coon Rapids. So with him not on the ballot, there's a really good chance that Republicans can flip this seat. The Republican candidate is a Navy veteran, a really good candidate they've recruited there. So that's a good chance for a flip. Chanhassen seat in Carver County. Carver County is really the epitome of swing districts and swing communities. Just kind of one way, Democrat, then Republican the next time. There's a Republican senator here. There's a Republican House member on the other side of this district. This was a close election, 400 votes in 2022. And they've got a very good Republican candidate as a teacher and an Army officer and a Red Bull. I think this is a good chance for a flip in the suburbs. A couple more. The Shakopee seat, Scott County. This one also has swung back and forth many times recently. I'm going to talk about the Eric Mortensen factor here. I call this a back to normal matchup because Eric Mortensen is kind of a controversial figure, and he's run in this district a few times. He won, served for 2 years, and then he lost. And he's kind of going back and forth. And so he's not on the ballot this year. I don't know what to say about Eric Mortensen. I'll just call him a controversial figure. But he's not on the ballot, which lowers the temperature in the race and makes it just a little more normal. And in a normal race in 2024, I think the Republican can win. They recruited a police officer, a school resource officer, actually a topic that's been very hot in the state recently. So that's a good opportunity for a pickup. So again, here's the map of the entire House. I didn't talk about close elections where Republicans have the seat. In order to win the majority, they really do have to keep all of the seats they already have. Now, I'll say this, I've done this a long time. I've worked in caucus politics a long time. When you have an election like 2022 that was bad for Republicans, anybody who survives that election is in pretty good shape for the next one that's a little better, like in 2024. So keeping the ones they already have is a little easier task after a kind of a blowout, wipeout election in 2022. So there are some seats, though, a Hermantown seat that's going to be difficult to keep, St. Cloud, Lino Lakes, Lake Elmo, some suburban seats. I know the Lino Lakes one's real close to me in White Bear Lake. I know the young man that's in there, he's working very hard. I don't think they're going to lose, but it's worth mentioning. So they do need to win all of the seats to keep the ones they already have and then pick up 4 to get to that 68. I've done this a couple times. In '98, I was on the team in the House and with Steve Swigum, and we did not lose an incumbent in 1998 and then picked up the requisite seats we needed to take the majority. But not losing an incumbent was very important. In 2016, I was on the Senate team. We took the majority. We did lose an incumbent or two, including our leader. Senator David Hand in Eden Prairie was the leader of our caucus and ran our election, but got beat. And then we still won the majority. It's very bizarre. Elections are bizarre. So you don't have to keep everyone, but the winning formula is to hold the ones you have and pick up the 4 you need. So we can't forget about the Senate. There is a little bit of Senate activity going on in Minnesota. You're looking at change in the election. There is one Senate race going on. Senator in the Minnetonka area is running for Congress in the 3rd District. So her seat is vacant, and there's a race to replace her in the Senate. Now remember, the Senate is 34 to 33. So if this seat flips from Democrat to Republican, the Senate Republicans would have the majority. It'd be another way you could change the landscape in St. Paul. I don't predict that's going to happen, but we can look at this race. It's an open seat, like I said. A tale of two halves. Half of this district on the west side is kind of, think about western or eastern Lake Minnetonka neighborhoods, all including the lake, more Republican. And then there's a Republican House member there. And then the east side of this district is more City, Minnetonka, Plymouth, way more Democrat. So who knows what's going to happen? It's 50-50. There's a couple of people that are running that everybody knows in the district. The Democrat has been a senator and got kind of stuck in the redistricting map. There was no spot for her, so she stepped aside. But now she's running again because it's open. And then the Republican ran last time. She's a pretty wealthy person, and she self-funded her campaign, wrote a big check. So there's kind of a lot of money being spent. Imagine, there's one race going on in the Senate. So all the interests in the Senate are focused on one little tiny district in the western suburbs there. So a lot of money is going to be spent here. ultimately, I don't predict a victory and a flip there, but you never know what could happen in elections, right? And then this race you're familiar with if you're watching the news, the Senator Nicole Mitchell from Woodbury. I don't want to go into the details of what, I shouldn't have put her mugshot up there, but it does help tell the story. So that's some context there. She was arrested. I won't go into why. But her trial is now in January. So she's not resigned. Walsh has called on her to resign. Leadership, the Democrat Party leadership has called on her to resign. But she hasn't resigned. Her trial is in January. So if you play it out, if she's convicted of a felony, which is what she's been charged with, I don't know that she can, well, she could continue to serve, I guess, but the Senate could expel her. There's all kinds of things the Senate could do. They could expel her. They've already said that they've already called on her to leave the Senate. So if she's convicted of a felony, she could be expelled from the Senate. Then there would be a special election in Woodbury and Maplewood to replace her, which again could tip that 34-33 balance, and a whole big focus could be on the eastern suburbs in St. Paul in February, March, whenever that comes out. She could also be recalled by her constituents. Recall in Minnesota is a very difficult bar to reach. You can't just say, I don't like that way that person's representing me, we want to recall them, sign a petition. It has to be, what I call the Feasance brothers, mis, mal, or non. The lawyers made me laugh on that one, but misfeasance, malfeasance, nonfeasance. You have to have a reason that in order to get the court to approve the recall petition. A felony conviction absolutely fits that specifically. So they could do a recall petition if she doesn't resign or the Senate doesn't kick her out. So keep your eye on Woodbury. That could be coming. So just a couple of other things on the environment. I mentioned Tim Walz. I thought when they announced that Tim Walz was going to be a VP pick for the Democrat ticket, I thought, well, that's going to be really bad for the chances of switching the House because, Minnesotans, we vote for our guy. And we voted for Humphrey. We voted for Mondale. We were the only state that voted for Mondale in 1984. And so that's fine. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. We support our leaders who get elevated to the national stage. So I thought, well, this is going to be bad. But the polling in Minnesota has shown that it's really not happening. There's one poll that showed that Biden was here, and when Walz was added the ticket, they actually went down, which makes no sense to me. I mean, you add our guy to the ticket, and then the polling goes down for the ticket. So you can see here, this is a June to September comparison. This is Star Tribune Minnesota poll. Biden 45, Trump 41, so what, a 4-point margin. And now fast forward, now it's Harris, Walz 48, Trump 43, so 5 points. So that didn't change at all, really, within the margin of error. So the Walz effect, I mean, there's a couple things going on here. One, obviously he's the native son and people want to vote for the ticket and they're going to be motivated to do that. But I will argue too that when Walz was named as the VP and got on the national stage, there was a lot of scrutiny on him that hadn't been put on him as he ran for Congress and for governor in Minnesota. And I think a lot of Minnesotans learned a lot about Tim Walz in the last month or two that they didn't know about him before. So, and we don't need to go into all that, but that's a factor in this race. You got to keep your eye on the top of the ticket. That really does swing things. I don't think Walz is going to be a factor, at least at the moment. The other huge factor in elections always, but then way more even in 2022, is abortion. So in 2022, if you remember, in the summer, we got the Dobbs decision, and it completely changed the election. The whole nature of the election was thrown upside down. And many, many, many Minnesotans in 2022 made their decision to vote based on that issue. Pro and con, by the way, but a lot of the decision making, the election was framed on that issue. And since then, around the country, other states have had elections, special elections, off-year elections, and abortion has been really prominent in all those elections. And conservatives and Republicans have not done well in those elections. So the question is abortion going to be the dominant issue in the 2024 election? And I got a couple of things here. I got some data and then my gut. My gut says no, it's not. It's just not. The economic issues are winning that day. That could change, but I don't think it is, and not nearly as much as 2022. And we polled young people in our quarterly poll. We did a whole poll on young people, just 18 to 34-year-olds. You can read about in this magazine, right? Yeah, it's in this magazine. So this is a poll of young people in May, and we asked them what's the most important issue for the 2024 election. And you maybe can't see, but it says inflation and the cost of living, 54%. The economy and jobs, another 22%. Immigration, 17%. Abortion is down at 14%. So young people in Minnesota are not saying abortion is the issue that's important to them for 2024 election. This is May. So I think that's another factor to keep in mind as you analyze whether this is going to change in November or not. So that's kind of the election from the more political, partisan House race ties. Let me talk about school boards. How are we doing on time? I should look at time. Is there a clock in here?
Yeah.
I got a lot of time.
A half hour.
All right. Well, I don't have to take it all. We started early, right? So we could end early. I mean, who's against that, right? Let me talk about the Minnesota Parents Alliance. This has been one of the most fun and exciting and positive projects that I've worked on in a long time. So we did a tour about critical race theory in 2021, and just a lot of angst about what's being taught in schools. And then kind of at the end of as we went around the state and had 30-some events, 100 people came out to every event. It was a very, very controversial topic. But it's always the case of like, well, what do we do about it? You know, we're trying to stir things up and say, what's the plan? Well, how do we fix things? And so we decided in 2021, well, one way you fix things is school boards. Local school boards in Minnesota run school policy. There's some state mandates, some federal mandates, absolutely. But if you can control the school board, elect a superintendent, put in place the teaching and learning and things that happen, you can have a real impact in your local community. And so we thought we should get involved in school board elections. And so we did a little campaign school in August of 2021, had about 70 candidates show up, invited every candidate running for the school board, no matter what party they affiliated with. Now, these are nonpartisan races. But a bunch of those candidates that we trained in one campaign school won. And then we had a meeting afterwards and went around the room with people that had won and lost, and a lot of discussion was formed. And out of that grew this organization, this new organization called the Minnesota Parents Alliance. And so this is a parent-based, parent-backed school board initiative that helps recruit and train and helps win parent-backed school board candidates. Academic achievement is the #1 goal of the Minnesota Parents Alliance. That is the #1 problem in the schools right now. And when you talk about all the other stuff going on, they're all distractions that take us away from the focus of math and reading. And over 50% of the kids in Minnesota right now can't read at grade level and can't do math at grade level. And that's something we should all be worried about. So the Minnesota Parents Alliance was formed, and the best thing that they do is there's a voter guide. So at minnesotaparents.org, you can go there, and if you want to know who do I vote for school board, you can find a voter guide with candidates, 109 candidates across the state that have been endorsed by the Minnesota Parents Alliance. You can trust this endorsement. These candidates have been vetted. They are student-backed. They're focused on achievement, not on radical agendas, not on dividing kids, math, reading, academic achievement. Minnesota Parents Alliance. So had some great success since 21 in getting school board members elected. The Hastings School Board is now a majority MPA-backed. They hired a new superintendent. They're doing great things in Hastings. The largest school district in the state, Anoka Hennepin, is got a 3-3 split right now, and so they're at the table compromising. No one group has the majority thought on that. So a lot of good things happening in Anoka Hennepin. And I think after this election, there's going to be a number of other school boards that are majority parent-backed, which is a really, really positive thing, very hopeful thing for the future, for sure. All right, let's get to I did one Trump thing. This is a poll from this morning. Notre Dame. The students at Notre Dame are favoring Donald Trump in an unscientific poll that one of the newspapers did. The only reason that's newsworthy is in 2016 they were all in for Hillary Clinton, and in 2020 overwhelmingly for Joe Biden. So this is a flip. So this is a very interesting thing that Notre Dame students are in a poll. I'm not going to back the science of this. It was done by one of the student newspapers, but I just threw that in as one national piece. I don't want to dwell on that. So let me switch gears a little bit and just talk about, because this is a Catholic group, right? So we can talk about our Catholicism. Just this idea of, all right, so politics is politics. I'm not involved in politics. I don't like politics. But we don't have that luxury. And so I want to talk just for a few minutes at the end here about our call as Catholics and as Christians to be involved in politics. And it starts with the Pope. Pope Francis, he says this, a good Catholic meddles in politics, offering the best of himself so that those who govern can govern. He also says, politics, according to the social doctrine of the church, is one of the highest forms of charity because it serves the common good. That's the essence of politics. It is love thy neighbor. And we can't retreat to the church in the basement here and talk amongst ourselves and have a bake sale and pray and work on ourselves. We are called to be in the community, and that means at work, that means in our family life, that means in our leisure time, and it means in the political arena as well. We are called to be in politics. And so the next one, the catechism speaks to it too. I think that's what Pope Francis was getting at here too. I brought my catechism tonight. I'll make a little plug here, a little side plug. I just finished the Catechetical Institute. So a 2-year study of the deep dive into the faith. And this is, if you haven't done that, I recommend it highly. I'll do a little commercial for the Catechetical Institute. And a good speaker would be to bring somebody in. I don't know if you can get Jeff Cavins or somebody in here, but it was a fantastic, life-changing 2-year program where we went deep into the faith. And this, I'm just going to share a paragraph here, just an example of how deep we went into the faith. This paragraph about getting involved in politics and government is part of the study of the commandments, part of the study of the love thy neighbor as thyself, under actually the 4th commandment, honor your father and mother. And so you talk about a deep dive. The 4th commandment means way more than honor your father and mother. It's the whole family life, our life in the community, the role of the elected officials, and the role of us in the government. So the duty of citizens to contribute along with the civil authorities to the good of society, in a spirit of truth, justice, solidarity, and freedom. The love and service of one's country follow from the duty of gratitude and belong to the order of charity. So again, it's that highest form of charity, love thy neighbor. We can't turn a blind eye to what's happening in society. We can't watch what's happening at the Capitol and say, I'm not involved in that. We have to get in the game in some way. Submission to legitimate authorities and service of the common good requires citizens to fulfill their roles in the life of the political community. So that's right from the Catechism, right from the 10 Commandments. So how do you do that? We're in a very good diocese here in Minnesota, in a good state. We have the Minnesota Catholic Conference. This is the voice of the church at the Capitol. Jason Atkins, who I've liberally quoted here in some of this theology I'm doing here because he's one of my mentors, but if you haven't had Jason as a speaker, he was also a great speaker at Minnesota Catholic Conference. But he runs the Minnesota Catholic Conference. That's the voice of the bishops at the Capitol. So they are there, they're visible, they're available. They do a lot of things. They lobby for and against bills. They work with legislators on policy. They've added something recently under the Pope's call to pray. So they're praying regularly at the Capitol, and you can get involved in that all. So Minnesota Catholic Conference, find them on their website. They have a Catholic advocacy network that you can join, and they'll send out an alert, say, hey, this bill's up in committee. Hit this button and send an email to your state representative to get involved and change policy. So they've made it easy, and they're watching what's going on in St. Paul, and they just need your help to advocate. Okay, what else can we do? Vote. I wrote vote early and often, and I stopped, All right. Just vote early. Don't vote often. But seriously, I mean, at a minimum, we should be voting. And whether you vote on election day or vote early, we've got a number of, just another commercial, American Experiment's doing a number of voter integrity seminars starting next week. We're going to talk about the whole election system and the vulnerabilities in it. And ultimately, it's going to be a fair election, and it's going to be fine. But we got to be vigilant, and we got to participate and vote. Run for office. I'll just make that pitch. I'm an elected official. I ran for the city council from Ward 1 in White Bear Lake. There's like 2,000 people in Ward 1. It's a small. We divide up our little city by wards. It's very fulfilling. I love it. I don't even consider it work. It's part of community. But I will tell a little story. When I told people I was running for the city council in 2015, I was working for the state senate, and I was in the office of Senator Warren Limmer from Maple Grove, and I'd worked for him for years. He was in the House, and then he's in the Senate. Known him forever. And I said, I'm going to run for the city council. He goes, oh, good, sit down. And he said, when I first ran, he said, I'm going to screw this up. He said, as long as you keep your faith centered and God centered in all of your decision making as an elected official, you're going to do fine. And I thought, wow, where did that come from? I've known this guy forever. He's never said anything kind of on that level, but it just really hit me. I'm like, wow, this is how he lives his life as an elected official, keeping his faith as part of all his decisions. And I've tried to do that, and I don't always succeed. You can ask our city manager and my colleagues in the council. But I thought it was very interesting when I've never forgotten it when he told me that. So if you're inspired, school board is a great place to start. City council, legislature, those seats are people like you that step up and run for office. You don't need to be rich. You don't need to have rich friends. It's a very doable thing for everybody in this room. So I encourage it. And then at all else, pray for elected leaders and pray. If you can do nothing else, we're absolutely called to prayer for the folks that are doing this work. And then my last slide, and this is again from this is kind of a popular meme, but I also got this from Jason Atkins. No matter who is in office, the Lord is on the throne. So we are called to certainly participate and to obey, but not always remembering that the Lord is on the throne. So. That's my presentation. We got time for questions if we want to do questions. We can. Oh, here they go. All right.
You said that you did a poll, right, of like 500 people. How did you decide who to poll? Were you out on the streets, door knocking, or was it like
Yeah. So the question is our quarterly poll. What's the methodology behind our quarterly poll? We have a pollster. It's Meeting Street Insights. They're out of South Carolina. Rob Autry is our pollster. We pay him a considerable amount of money. So it is a professional poll, as you'd see in the newspapers or on the political campaigns. And so their methodology is phone. So it's a mix of landlines and cell phones. They keep calling and interviewing people until they get the right mix. There's a kind of a data mix, so they end up with 500 interviews, but they might have called 700 people to get the 500 they wanted. They want the right mix of male, female, geography, political balance, things like that. So it's a scientific poll with a plus or minus of about 4.88%, one way or the other. But that's what we've been doing with our pollster. And I'll just say we've done some unique things. We did that young person's poll in May, so it was just 18 to 34-year-olds. We only found 300 of them. You could get a smaller sample size because of the age group, and we did a lot more texting and had text to reach 18 to 34-year-olds. No one has a landline, so we had to find them, on their phones. But we have a pollster. So, yep, back.
So my family, my in-laws, and my parents are of different political persuasion. And I think oftentimes it's kind of hard to have these conversations with my parents because they're kind of an authority figure, kind of not really.
Yeah. No, they are.
In the sense that, and it's hard because like you bring these issues like there are babies being left, and they would definitely disagree with that we shouldn't do that. They would agree with like the whole transgender movement that's going on about removing a child. I don't know if that's these are just like things, it's crazy
Sure.
stuff that's happening, but it's legal in the state of Minnesota, and they just don't. It just doesn't seem to connect, And I've been called it's the weirdest thing. I'm called white supremacist in my family.
You don't look like a white supremacist to me. I don't know.
My joke is always to them like, well, maybe I wasn't raised by white people. But yeah, what is your advice?
I guess there's so much polarization and people get so hot so fast, and so again you got to come with charity, but you got to come with the truth. I liken it to one of my revelations in the Catechetical Institute was how I approached my faith and my own evangelization, and I kind of have been for a long time, and I thought I was going to go to the CI to learn how right I was. I'm right and you're wrong. This is the one true church and yours is not. And I kind of halfway through realized that's not the message. And I think it's the same in politics. Maybe it's not quite the same in politics, but in Catholicism for me, it's I'm not right and you're wrong. You're missing out. You're missing out because whatever tradition you're in, you're missing out on the fullness of the Eucharist and the truth of the Catholic faith. And so I'm selling. I'm in marketing. I'm gently selling, trying to get people to my way. And maybe family is hard. Generation before is hard because they've always voted that way, and they're thinking of a party from 30 years ago or 20 years ago. They're thinking of leaders that were in that party 20, and so it's just a little bit, hey, have you taken a new look, a fresh look at what's going on? Here's something that's happening that's true. I think you just got to gently sell, and it's not worth ruining Thanksgiving over. I don't believe that, and over time, with the truth, you can win out. Yep.
Thanks for sharing the Parents Alliance, because I have my vote ballot printed up. I'm like, how am I gonna find any information? So that's really a great resource. How about for city council? Is there something to?
There really isn't anything like that for city council or judges. We get asked a lot about judges. When I used to work at the Republican Party, the phone would ring. Who do I vote for judge? I'm like, no clue. I mean, really. So it's hard. And city council is just so many of them on the ballot. There isn't an organization like that for city council. You know, I read what most newspapers, the small newspapers in communities will write something about the election, have them do a questionnaire. You can usually get a sense of their values by reading that. I look for their approach to government and things like that, so I can usually tell. But yeah, go ahead.
I found that the best way for me to figure out who to vote for city council is to see who else's sign is in their yard.
Yeah.
They're all, there's 4 candidates in my yard in Hills. They all say the same thing. It's all very fluffy, and it's like, what? Do I just vote on how they look? Well, then I start just driving around, I see, okay, who else's signs are accompanying them. And
Team A and Team B.
I found my 2 candidates to vote for.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's incumbents usually running, so you can at least look at their record and look at what they've done on a council or a board or anything like that. So, got to do a little research. It's work, but yeah. Go.
Was that website for the school district candidates, MinnesotaParents.org?
I think so. Did I get it wrong? I might have got it wrong.
I couldn't remember. I tried right.
Yeah, it's Minnesota spelled out. MinnesotaParents.org.
Okay, that's great.
I'm pretty sure I got that right. Yeah, there's a voter guide there. It's great. It's
Another thing with the Catholic Advocacy Network, I'm on that email list. I don't know, maybe I don't have to say this because there are probably a bunch of people here who are on that list. But 2023, in early April, I was alerted by them to go to a meeting. I can't remember the name of the organization, but it's Catholics, Protestants, and Jews that kind of collaborate to figure out what their agenda is with the legislature. Sent to me in your district, 64A. So with Senator Murphy, and I can't remember the name. It's among my other my representative, and they're both way against my point of view.
Yep.
And I had just left my mother in the hospital at the time. I was really worried about it, and this was about the assisted suicide.
Yep.
I want to tell you something. I talked to Senator Murphy, and this is at Lumen Christi Church. First of all, I got up and I read the statement that they had said, you go and say this. And it was like, and no one else had shown up there that was going to talk about this. And
Was this a town meeting that the senator was having then, or?
no, this was at Lumen Christi.
Oh, okay.
It used to be St. Leo's in Highland Park.
Yeah.
And I sat down, and there was a hand on my shoulder, and a woman said to me, "It's really brave of you to have gotten up and made a pro-life statement at a gathering like this." And it was really shocking because we're at Lumen Christi.
Yeah.
Right? But then when I talked to Senator Murphy, I said, she said to me, I understand I was a nurse and everything. And she lied to my face. She said, look, I wrote the legislation. It's not a suicide bill.
I know.
It's just for getting, medication drugs. She's a Malthusian, Mom.
Yeah, language is key. They play a lot with language. That's an emerging issue, by the way. The end of life issues. And there's an incrementalism to legislation. You come to then you get a hearing, and we're not going to do it. We're not going to do it. Don't worry. And then next year, we had this hearing last year. Another hearing, another committee, and they build a momentum over time. And they're in it for the long haul, and we need to be in it for the long haul as well. But that's an emerging issue that we're going to have to be vigilant over. By the way, in 64A, in November, in 39 days, you can work for Dan Walsh. You can vote for Dan Walsh. My first cousin's running for the second time, and it's a hopeless cause. He's not going to win. But he's put his name on the ballot as a service to people in the district, so there's a choice. So there's St. Paul. Yep. Way back.
Yeah, thank you for speaking this evening. Question about surveys. I get texts a lot of time from Minnesota Survey something. What is the worth of filling out, clicking those links to fill out some of those voter surveys? Is it middling? Is it worth it?
Yeah, I don't.
Is that response going to be thrown out? I don't know how filters normally parse through those, because I give serious responses, but I don't want that information out.
I don't think that would disqualify you. They're just trying to get information for the next poll or for fundraising or for whatever they're doing. I mean, I do that at American Experiment. I want you all to fill out your email address and give it to me so I can email you stuff. I mean, that's the game. So, and we only get Tuesday and Friday. That's all.
And if how can I steal the election for my benefit? How can I do it for me?
It's very simply,
I'm just kidding.
just vote, but only once.
We live in White Bear. I'm curious, is Patty Bradway have any chance of beating Karen?
Gosh, I'll just put you on the spot. Yes, of course she does. She is working really hard. Patty Bradway is working very hard.
I know.
She's door knocking. She's. I get emails every day saying, "Why am I not door knocking with her?" And I see people in the community like, she's doing a great job. It's an uphill battle. The demographics, the numbers. I would put that district in one of those districts that's just like going to go Republican or going to go Democrat. Now, elections are weird, and you never know what's going to happen. Top of the ticket, all those things impacted. I always say to candidates, and I would say this to Patty. There's wave elections. You hear about the wave that came one way or the wave that went another way. So if you're a candidate in a wave election, it doesn't do any good if you're on the beach and your surfboard is stuck in the sand. So you got to get out there and get battling and be ready to catch that wave. And I think she's doing that.
Do you think people in that district don't really understand how radical Karen was?
I think that's true, yeah. And unless Patty could raise a lot of money and mail that message and do social media to get that out on her, that's going to be just a, Democrat, Republican, and the numbers aren't good enough there. So, but man, don't tell her I said that, because I answered your question and said she can win, right? We got witnesses. She can win. I'm very hopeful. I'm going to vote for her. I gave her money. I mean, I think she's doing a great job. She's working really hard. By the way, she's a nurse at a crisis pregnancy center. I mean, she's the kind of person we need in the legislature.
I ran into her walking out of daily mass last week in St. Peter's. And it was a neighbor of mine, has her sign in her yard.
Yeah.
And that's, yeah. So I think it can spread, so
Yeah.
that's good.
All right, go Bears.
Addressing the question that someone asked about city council races, even though city council races are nonpartisan officially, if you get in touch with the Senate district level Republican Party, they know who you are, so they can give you good advice.
Yeah, good advice. Good advice. Yeah, Matt.
Paragraph 2239?
Yep, I think so.
Yep. So, okay, since you did a deep dive into this, could you explain a little more fully exactly when it says submission to legitimate authorities? What legitimate authorities actually means?
Well, I think that's hedge language in there that says, you don't have to submit to every government. I mean, there has to be some level of legitimacy to it. But it's a few times in the Catechism that says, give unto Caesar what is Caesar's. I think that's where this, if you're looking for a biblical, and I'm not the theology guy, get Jason Atkins in here to answer this better. But it's that language is kind of in there several times in this section, and I think it's, we're called to participate, but it has to be legitimate. It can't be. You don't have to put up with everything they're doing. That's a tough call these days too. So okay.
Yeah, with Scott Jensen's failed run for office, there's been some criticism of the way the Republican candidate for governor is chosen. Can you speak to that?
Yes.
Comment on that?
So the question is about how the parties choose their gubernatorial candidates, specifically the Republican Party. I was at that convention. I've been a party guy my whole life. I've been a proponent of the caucus process, the precinct caucuses, delegates, conventions, choosing the nominee. That's the first time in my life, in my career, that I said, this is a bleep show, and I'm not doing this anymore. It was a terrible process to pick our nominee. So we have to do better. There are people working on that. The party chair right now, David Hand, is trying to change rules a little bit to make a better group of people that kind of end up there. One of the problems with that is that the Republican Party picks their delegates based on kind of Republican strength in the state. So they'll go back to the last big election. In this case, it'll be 2022 gubernatorial race as they go forward. So your congressional district, like the congressional district is 7, 8, 6. the more Republicans there are in your congressional district based on the vote in the last election, the more delegates you get. So what happens is a group shows up and all the power to nominate the next candidate is in these deeply Republican areas. So those people are like, well, we need a really, really solid conservative, and that tends to make the nominee tilt more conservative, but it tilts them away from the general public. So if you had a more uniform distribution of delegate strength at a convention, every congressional had the same. In Minneapolis, St. Paul, the suburbs, the inner ring suburbs would say, hey, we have to win an election to govern, and you can't be that way with the entire state, or certainly in Minneapolis or St. Paul, and win. So if you gave them more strength and more voice, that could make a better nominee. So that's in the works. But I certainly agree with you. We got to do better in picking a candidate. So okay, back there.
Yeah, I'm just curious. Do you guys have any plans to reach the younger audience? I know social media is a really great way.
So yeah, speaking of questions about reaching a young audience, we get this a lot. We spent a lot of time and money on it at American Experiment. So we have a Young Leaders Council that we specifically reach out to. We do events throughout the year just for the young. We did this magazine story is all full of young people. It's kind of about young people, but that is a constant battle. I will say that if you went to one of our events, our average age is pretty high, but because young people are busy. I mean, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, we're raising kids and we're going to practice, and so we're not able to go to events, and things. But yeah, and then on my team in communications, we are on every social media channel, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. We're looking at metrics all the time, trying to reach that younger audience. Absolutely, we take a white paper, and our economists write 50-page white papers with all these sources. It's a great document. We take it and break it down into tiny little chunks and do little videos and shorts and TikTok reels and things like that to deliver that content out there. So we have a podcast, all of that. So that's our effort at that. So good question, though. Okay, you already had one. Anybody else? Okay, we're here.
I think I've got about 3 or 4 questions. Just want to know more about the Center for the American Experiment. When was it started? Who started it? And to what extent is it Catholic or Catholic-minded? And is this center or this format, is it in other states?
Yeah, great questions. So American Experiment was started about 1991. We've been around over 30 years by Mitch Pearlstein. Mitch Pearlstein was an education, he was in the Reagan Education Department in DC, and he's a Minnesotan. He came back to Minnesota to open a Minnesota-based think tank. His focus in the beginning, I'm going to segue this a little bit, his focus when he started, I think, the American Experiment was on the family structure, actually. That's his big thing, and he ran it forever. He's retired now, but the lack of fathers in the family. He wrote extensively about the lack of fathers in families, the breakdown of the family, and that's what's leading to all of the problems in society. Still true today. Hasn't changed in 30 years. That was his focus when he started it. We're actually returning to our roots with a new initiative soon on child protection. We're going to take on the child protection issue in Minnesota, and it kind of does take us back to our roots, because it's when a child is removed from a home, how fast do we put them back with the family? There's children that are dying. The foster care is a mess. The system is a mess. So we're going to work on that as an issue and kind of return to our roots a little bit. We are not unique in the country. We are Minnesota's think tank. We're part of an organization called the State Policy Network, which is a network of, I'd call them center-right, libertarian think tanks around the country. So we're part of a network. There's a think tank like Minnesota, like American Experiment, in almost every state, pretty much every state. Some states have more than one. So Wisconsin has a couple of good think tanks. Iowa has a good think tank. We are in North Dakota. We have American Experiment in North Dakota because there was a void there. So we're filling that with a whole nother kind of operation.
So do you folks compete for the same funding pool?
Well, we raise most of our money from Minnesotans. So no, I mean, we don't compete nationally. There's grants that we apply for from organizations, and sometimes we get those, sometimes we don't. Most of our revenue comes from small donations from, like I said, we have about 8,000 to 10,000 donors every year that donate to us, and some big donors too. So I wouldn't say we compete with other think tanks in Minnesota. We're the largest conservative organization in the state by far, bigger than the Republican Party, bigger than any other conservative organization.
Bigger in terms of?
Money, impact, donations. The mailing list I'm talking about trying to get you to join, we have 150,000 people on that email list. Now we've grown that in the last 4 years from 14,000 to 150,000 because that's been a focus of mine. But we have a huge reach. That magazine goes to 68,000 Minnesotans every quarter. And it costs a lot of money to put that out. And if we had our way and budget wasn't an issue, we'd send that to every house in Minnesota. That's kind of our goal. We want to make a smarter voter. We don't tell you who to vote for, but when you go in that booth, we want you to be smarter. We are not Catholic focused. I happen to be Catholic, but that is not a focus of the center. We're a center right would be the best way to describe us. Is that a good summation, or we don't keep going?
Yeah, when I called
We got one
Center
more
for
here.
American Experiment to find a speaker, the top dog had me call Bill to check with Bill. because-
Yeah, they didn't ask me. They asked my boss, and my boss said, "Oh, you want Bill?" So that's good. Last one, last question. Oh, you know what? I didn't. I brought gifts. You know, we did this. We did this campaign a few years ago. It kind of fits. We did a campaign called "Stay and Fight," so we had these shirts made. So that's kind of thing. We're not leaving the state. A lot of our donors are leaving the state. We've heard about some of the table talk. Folks are leaving the state because of the picture I painted. We are going to stay and fight. When the politics catches up, we'll be at the legislature with ideas, bill legislation, repealing some of this stuff. So I've got two larges. You know, we can give them to the guy that asked the last question. You know, he gets one. You know. Well, I don't know. Well, if wants the other one, we'll have it as a prize. Go ahead.
So you briefly mentioned, reaching out to our lawmakers, calling them, emailing them. So I have heard that my whole life. Call your senator, call your congressman, email them, whatever it takes to get in touch with them. And I've done that on a handful of occasions. Every time the response I've gotten has basically been, here's a policy paper on why you're wrong. And so the lesson I've kind of always taken away from it is like, this is an absolute waste of time. Like basically the moment the election is won, everything is decided in favor of whoever won. Can you
I get that. I don't agree with that. The question is it really effective to email your legislator, and do they just ignore it as a die cast once? You're right. I mean, I used to talk about elections are like jury selection. I mean, once the jury is selected, I mean, the election's over, you're stuck with the verdict. And I get frustrated with policy groups that go to the Capitol trying to change things. And when I worked there, it drove me nuts, because I'd say, the Chamber of Commerce would come in, you got to kill this bill. I'm like, well, where were you guys in October when we were trying to win elections to get a better jury that this bill wouldn't even be here? They're here now telling me we have to kill the bill. So, but I will say this, it does work. It has to be personal. We do a lot of campaigns where we write the email, and then you click on it, it sends it off. And so that senator might get 30 or 50 or 100 of basically the same email. Now we're using AI now, and so they generate way more than just the standard one. So, but I'm sure they can sniff that out too, even though they're different. The best communication is personal, a phone call, a visit. An email still works. I can just tell you from working at the legislature for years, if I'd have legislators come to my office and say, I'm getting crushed in the district. Everyone's so mad. I say, calm down. What are you talking about? I got emails. How many emails do you get? 4. Okay. 4 emails took this legislator to here. So it does work. It does work. If they start hearing the same thing from a lot of people, they know these are people that are going to have to vote for me in the next election. I got to be careful here. So I still think it works. Yeah. One more? Mark, ask the last one.
I'll give you a book for that.
I'll trade you a book for a shirt. Yeah, I love it.
My question is, what do you think of Royce White? What kind of showing he'll do against, which I think he's running against Senator Klobuchar, and also, what do you think is going to happen with Ilhan Omar?
Well, I'll take the second one first. Omar survived her primary challenge in the Democrat Party. That's a real election for her. So she's going to be fine. It's been very difficult to beat her in Minneapolis in the suburbs. So I don't anticipate her losing. I think the Klobuchar race is really difficult. She's been in a long time. People know her, like her. I will say the polling is way closer than I thought it would be, and I think that's not so much who Royce White is. That's just sort of the division in the state. That's just a proxy for I'm not voting for a Democrat, and so it might be close. And if somehow Trump wins the state, then you could maybe see Klobuchar losing, but I don't anticipate that. She has a huge money advantage, and I'm sure she's got good polling that would say if it gets close in the next 39 days that they would start spending a lot of money. And So if you see her spending a lot of money, you'll know that they're close. But
He seems like, I know he's a really big underdog. What do you think his future is with it,
I don't know, he's young. He's young. I mean, a lot of people run more than once, run and lose and come back and do it again. So keep your eye on him.
Thank you.
I got one
Okay.
last question. What do you say about the, I heard about the financial disadvantage the Republicans are at. The Democrats have raised like 6 times as many dollars as the Republicans. Is there a reason for that?
So do you know, is that a national number or a state number?
The state number.
Yeah. That doesn't surprise me. That happens every year in Minnesota. Democrats outspend Republicans in Minnesota consistently and by a lot. I can tell you in 2016, I was running the Senate election for the Republicans, and we got outspent, I want to say 10 to 1. 10 to 1. I mean, it was overwhelming. We still won the majority.
So it's
You
6
can-
to 1
you-
right now.
Yeah, and then in 2020, we got the report a few weeks out of the election. We got the financial reports for that time, and we were just getting crushed in spending again. And I got really anxious, and I had to go back to look at the 2016 numbers at that time to calm myself down and to calm my team down, because it's fine. We got outspent. We're actually not getting outspent as much as we did last time. So there's union money, there's special interest money. The Democrats in Minnesota do a way better job. They have way more organizations that give to them on a kind of a large scale. I always used to joke, Ken Martin is the chair of the Democrat Party. He makes like 8 phone calls, and he's got most of his money, And then Republicans don't have institutional players like unions, mainly unions, millions and millions of dollars from unions, including the teachers union, the largest one, fund their campaigns. We could do a whole topic on public employee unions funding winners and then getting paid more and more jobs opening up because they fund the winners. The whole public employee union issue is something we could examine, but they're real, and it's a huge fundraising advantage. But in the end, you can't, in a legislative race, there's only so much you can do with money. If there's only 40,000 people in the district, you can send them all that mail you want. At the end, I don't know if anybody's been in a swing district before, when you go to your mailbox and you get 4 or 5 pieces of mail, pro and con, it all goes in the trash. It's not very effective. Or they get on TV and they bombard money on TV. TV is really expensive, and they'll spend a lot of money on it, but it's not effective. So there's a limit to money in campaigns, and in this state, we've been able to overcome it. So that's too long an answer, I'm sorry. Okay, one more.
So I deeply appreciate your enthusiasm and your.
I was told to bring hope.
And your just pouring out all this information in a very youthful way. And so it may be an obvious answer, but I have to ask, what's your inspiration? Like, how do you, this amount of energy that you're pouring out?
Ah, wow, interesting question. What's my inspiration? I don't know. I am an optimist. You can ask people that I've worked with. I've lost in Minnesota as a Republican. If I've got probably a winning record, but it's probably 55-45, and so I've lost a lot of elections, and I'm like this in those elections too. And then the day after, it's like, oh man, we got crushed. And then I'm the first one to say, let's go. We got to get going. So I don't know. I'm just an optimist, and I studied and I did the numbers and look. They got to flip 4 seats. There's 7 good chances. That's not enough. I mean, that's not a lot, but they can do it. I'm hopeful. Well, that's it. I got to think about that question on the way home now.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.